They underestimate her. They always do. Because she does not fill the room with noise or make herself known with theatrical presence, she is misread, mislabeled, mistaken for meek. Before we dive into 7 habits that make a quiet woman powerful, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this. But silence is not the absence of power, it is its birthplace. In a world addicted to volume, a quiet woman becomes an anomaly, one they don't know how to categorize, one they don't know how to control. She doesn't perform small talk like a dance. She doesn't decorate her sentences with self-deprecating apologies to make herself more palatable. And because of that, she unnerves people, especially those who need constant validation to feel real. The quiet woman carries with her the echo of something ancient, something undisturbed by the surface games of society. Her stillness is not emptiness. It is a reservoir. She has lived long enough, perhaps suffered long enough, to learn that not every thought demands to be spoken, not every feeling needs to be performed. Her silence is not compliance, it is discernment. Carl Jung wrote about the richness of the inner world, about how introversion is not a flaw but a function, one that orients a person toward depth, meaning, and transformation. The quiet woman lives from this interior. While others race outward to be seen, she descends inward to know. That knowing gives her a steadiness that cannot be mimicked by charm or power posturing. And that steadiness, that refusal to be disturbed by the frantic rhythm of modern life, makes her dangerous to those who depend on external chaos to distract from internal disarray. She sees through people, not because she's trying to, but because she can't help it. Her observation is not judgment, it is pure awareness. She watches, she senses, she feels the undertow of a conversation before it crashes. She has learned to trust the silence between words more than the words themselves. She no longer entertains what drains her. She no longer explains her absence. She does not react to bait, does not dance for attention, does not soften her edges to be invited into rooms she no longer wants to enter. This disturbs those who mistake control for connection. They fear what they cannot predict, and a quiet woman is exactly that: unreadable, unshakable, unmoved. The masks people wear begin to itch around her. Because she does not give them the reaction they crave, they label her cold. Because she does not participate in the performance, they label her rude. But she is none of those things. She is simply unwilling to betray herself to make others comfortable. Her silence is not a wound, it is a choice. It is the sound of her returning to herself again and again. In her quiet, she has learned what others fear to face, that stillness reveals truth, that noise conceals fear, that wisdom lives in the space between stimulus and response. She is not a mystery because she is hiding. She is a mystery because she has mastered herself. And in a world that teaches women to be open books, she has chosen to be a locked journal with gold-edged pages, readable only by those who know the language of soul. She will not tell you who she island. She will show you through what she does not tolerate, what she walks away from, what she no longer justifies. This is the misunderstood force of silence. It does not beg to be known. It simply becomes impossible to forget. Carl Jung believed that the outer world is only a reflection of the vast, uncharted inner world, and that true power begins with the willingness to turn inward, to face the unconscious, and to integrate what is hidden. For the quiet woman, this isn't a theory, it's a way of life. She has walked the dim corridors of her own psyche, lit only by the flicker of her curiosity, and discovered the parts of herself that others deny. While the world worships performance, she honors process. She has sat with her shadows, wept in rooms where no one applauded her grief, and emerged, not louder, but deeper. In the silence of her becoming, she has learned to tell the difference between reaction and response, between noise and signal, between validation and truth. Jung spoke often about individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are by integrating all aspects of the self, the light and the dark, the known and the buried. This is the quiet woman's terrain. She does not rush through discomfort to find peace. She sits in it, studies it, learns its language. And in doing so, she becomes fluent in emotional intelligence, not the kind sold in leadership books, but the kind that whispers to her in the middle of the night when no one is watching. Her quiet is not absence, it is alchemy. In a world that rewards the loudest voice in the room, she becomes magnetic precisely because she is not trying to be. Her presence unsettles those who mistake visibility for worth, because her power does not rely on being seen, it relies on being centered. She does not need to chase connection, because she is connected to herself, to her intuition, to the deeper rhythms of life that most people ignore while scrolling, shouting, or scrambling for attention. Jung wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The quiet woman knows this. She has made the unconscious conscious. She has stared into her patterns and refused to be ruled by them. She has ended cycles without ceremony, walked away from roles she was praised for, and said no to things that once defined her. This kind of clarity is unsettling to the fragmented psyche, because it cannot be manipulated. It does not waver for approval. It does not bend to fear. The quiet woman is not a mystery because she is hidden. She is a mystery because she is whole. Wholeness, in Jung's framework, is not about perfection, it's about integration. It's about knowing your rage and your grace, your tenderness and your edge, and refusing to exile any part of yourself to make others feel comfortable. This is the quiet woman's power. She holds her multitudes in silence. She does not perform her healing, she embodies it. And because of that, she becomes a mirror. Not everyone can handle their reflection. That is why they flinch. That is why they label her distant. But those who recognize her power do not fear her quiet. They revere it. Because in her silence lives the blueprint for what it means to truly know yourself. The first habit that makes a quiet woman powerful is this: she observes before she speaks. Not because she lacks something to say, but because she knows the value of presence before performance. In a world where noise is often mistaken for depth and constant commentary is rewarded more than thoughtfulness, she has chosen a different rhythm. Hers is the tempo of insight, of stillness before speech, of watching with the kind of attention that makes people feel seen in ways they didn't consent to. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." And the quiet woman knows this intimately. She has sat with her shadows long enough to stop fearing them, and in doing so, she can recognize the shape of someone else's without needing them to announce it. Her silence is not empty. It is filled with discernment, with data, with the kind of awareness that can read a room faster than any extroverted charm ever could. She watches how someone fidgets when their truth brushes too close to the surface. She notices the way certain words are chosen to manipulate rather than express. She sees how people flinch around real intimacy and puff their chests when they feel small. She sees all of it, not to judge, but to understand. And she speaks only when her words can cut through the static. This unnerves people who equate quiet with weakness. Insecure men in particular often feel exposed by her gaze, as though she sees the scaffolding of their ego and chooses not to validate it. They may call her cold or hard to read, but what they really mean is that she doesn't perform submission through conversation. She doesn't soothe fragile self-esteem with constant agreement. Her words are chosen not to impress but to illuminate, and when she finally does speak, it lands. It lands because it wasn't driven by the need to fill silence or be liked. It was driven by truth. Her power is rooted in this restraint. She has no need to prove her intelligence, no appetite to dominate a discussion just to be right. Instead, she waits, she gathers. And when the moment is right, she delivers something so precise, so emotionally clean, that it leaves no room for distortion. Jung believed projection is the enemy of self-awareness, and the quiet woman has learned to recognize what belongs to her and what doesn't. She doesn't absorb other people's discomfort as her responsibility. She simply reflects it. That reflection is terrifying to those who expect women to mirror only their strengths. But she is not here to flatter or to fix. She is here to see. And in being so deeply attuned to her environment, she becomes immune to manipulation. She sees through charm, through credentials, through performances of power. She understands that most people are acting out unresolved stories, and she refuses to be cast in someone else's script. This habit of observing first is not passive, it is a form of mastery. A way of staying in control without controlling. A way of holding space without being consumed. And those who are not grounded in themselves will always find her presence unsettling. Not because she is dangerous, but because she cannot be deceived. Her silence is not absence, it is precision, and it is the first, most unshakable sign of her power. The second habit that makes a quiet woman powerful is her ability to build without broadcasting. She does not need applause to begin, nor permission to continue. In a world addicted to validation and performance, she chooses to craft her life with intention, not audience. Carl Jung said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." This woman understands that truth not as a poetic notion, but as a lived experience. She moves in silence, not because she's hiding, but because she knows the sacredness of becoming. Her dreams are not for display, they are for devotion. While others curate milestones to be consumed and milestones to impress, she is busy doing the work that makes her soul stronger. Her power is in her privacy, in the quiet discipline that grows roots while no one is watching. It unsettles people, especially those who equate visibility with value. They wonder what she's doing, how she's doing it, why she isn't sharing her every move. But she knows that power is never in the performance, it is in the process. And hers is not a life built to be envied. It is built to be lived. She has learned that not every sacred thing must be shared, that not all growth looks like a highlight reel, that some of the most powerful transformations happen in silence, under pressure, far from the gaze of those who would rather consume her story than understand it. Insecure men, especially those who thrive on being needed or admired, find themselves rattled by her independence. She does not need a spotlight to feel worthy. She does not require applause to feel seen. She moves forward without a map carved by external praise, and that makes her untouchable to those who try to control through recognition. They cannot bait her with compliments or diminish her with silence. She knows who she is when no one is watching, and that is where her foundation lives. When she builds from alignment. Her goals are not performative, they are precise. She listens to her intuition more than opinions. She listens to her body more than trends. She listens to the slow, steady voice inside her that says, "Keep going, this is yours to create." And so she does. She builds relationships that are nourishing, not flashy. She builds work that is fulfilling, not just impressive. She builds boundaries that protect her peace, not just her image. And while others may misunderstand her silence for stagnation, she is in fact growing more whole by the day. Jung believed that true selfhood could not emerge without solitude, and this quiet woman has embraced that solitude as a sacred right. Her power is not in being seen, it is in being rooted. When she arrives whole, not because she demanded to be noticed, but because she never stopped listening to herself. And that, more than anything, makes her a force. She is not the loudest voice in the room. She is the frequency that hums beneath the surface, unshaken. She doesn't need to announce what she is becoming. She only needs to become it. The third habit that makes a quiet woman powerful is her ability to listen with her whole body. While others prepare replies before the question is even complete, she absorbs. She listens beyond words, past tone, beneath silence. Her power lies in her presence, not her performance. And it unnerves people, especially insecure men, because her silence isn't passive, it is perceptive. She sees the contradiction between what they say and what they mean. She feels the tremor in their voice when they're pretending to be composed. She notices the shift in energy before the mask slips. Carl Jung taught us that we are not what we say, but what we do not yet understand about ourselves, and she knows this. That is why she listens, not just with her ears, but with her intuition, her skin, her breath. She listens to what is said and what is not, to the pauses that stretch too long, to the laughter that hides the ache, to the explanations that sound too rehearsed. And in doing so, she becomes dangerous to those who rely on illusion. The insecure man who thrives on performance and bravado finds himself undone in her gaze, because he cannot manipulate what she already feels in her bones. He cannot hide from a woman who is fluent in shadow. While others may try to dominate conversation or impress her with noise, she sits in the quiet and waits for the truth to arrive. And it always does, because when she is with you, she is fully with you. Her attention does not waver. Her eyes do not dart around the room looking for distraction. Her silence is not discomfort, it is inquiry. And that depth unsettles the shallow. They mistake her quiet for compliance, but it is curiosity. They mistake her stillness for submission, but it is discernment. She is taking in the soul behind the words, the story behind the facade, the wound behind the arrogance, and that kind of presence cannot be performed, it can only be lived. Insecure men do not know how to meet it. They want to be admired, not understood. They want to be heard selectively, not seen wholly. They want to control the narrative, not be witnessed beyond it. And so they fear her. They call her intimidating. They call her intense. But what they really mean is this: she listens so deeply, I cannot lie to myself in her presence. Jung believed the unconscious reveals itself constantly through slips, projections, and energy. She listens for those. She reads the unsentences. She tracks the emotion behind the eyes. She hears the boy behind the man, and she decides, not based on surface but on essence. That is her power, not to speak first, but to feel fully, not to fill space, but to hold it, not to correct, but to reveal. She may not respond quickly, but when she does, it lands. It cuts through the noise. It disarms. It heals, or it confronts, but it always brings truth. Because she does not listen to react, she listens to understand. She knows that every conversation is an invitation to deeper seeing, and she chooses her depth with care. Her listening is not a tactic. It is a gift. It is a power, forged in stillness and sharpened by solitude. And that, to a man who depends on performance, is a kind of mirror he never asked to look into. The fourth habit that makes a quiet woman powerful is her refusal to speak unless it truly matters, unless her words carry weight, unless the moment calls for meaning. In a world that rewards volume over value, speed over substance, and dominance over depth, her restraint is mistaken for weakness by those who confuse noise with intelligence. But her silence is not a gap to be filled, it is an intentional holding of power. She does not speak to be included, to be liked, to be validated. She speaks when there is something sacred to say. And that terrifies the insecure man, who thrives on the illusion of control built from constant chatter. Carl Jung taught that the psyche hides behind personas, masks designed to gain approval and avoid rejection, and it is through authentic expression that the mask begins to slip. Her speech is not performance. It is medicine. It is mirror. When she speaks, it is not to flatter or soften the discomfort of others, it is to reveal, to cut through distortion, to say what has long been left unsaid. And because she does not hand out her words like currency, when she does speak, people listen. Her silence sharpens her voice. Her stillness amplifies her message. Insecure men recoil at this because they are used to being catered to, soothed, managed by the women around them. They expect compliance disguised as kindness. But a woman who speaks only when it matters will not waste her voice, explaining her boundaries, justifying her worth, or cushioning her truth to protect fragile egos. She will not entertain nonsense, nor reward manipulation with engagement. Her words are not a resource to be exploited, they are a sovereign act. And when she chooses to speak, it is with a clarity that leaves no room for confusion. Jung believed that individuation, the journey toward wholeness, requires the integration of the shadow, and her voice often functions as a trigger for that process in others. When she names what is not being named, when she calls out the thing everyone else avoids, she becomes the catalyst. Not because she seeks power over others, but because she cannot tolerate dishonesty within herself. She has burned through the phase of needing to be liked. She has sat in the discomfort of her own silence long enough to know that speaking without integrity is worse than being misunderstood. Her words carry consequence, and so she guards them not out of fear, but out of reverence. She knows what it costs to speak the truth in a world that rewards the pleasing lie. She does not gossip, does not argue for sport, does not speak to fill the silence. She chooses presence over performance every time, and that is why she is powerful. Because when she does speak, she does not merely share thoughts, she shifts energy. Her voice becomes a tuning fork for truth, a vibration that disrupts the illusion. The insecure man cannot predict her, cannot provoke her into reaction, cannot extract validation through cleverness. Her quiet is not submission, it is sovereignty. And her words are not meant to entertain, they are meant to awaken. In her silence there is listening. In her voice there is direction. And in her restraint, there is power the world has yet to learn how to measure. That is why when she finally speaks, the room listens even if they pretend not to, especially the ones who feel most exposed. The fifth habit that makes a quiet woman powerful is that she does not perform femininity like a trick trained to earn applause. She does not contort herself into digestible shapes or rehearse softness to avoid being seen as too much. The world has taught women to play roles before they ever understand their own names. Be the good girl, the nurturing one, the pretty one, the forgiving one, the one who smooths over awkward silences with smiles that hurt the jaw. But a quiet woman who has met herself no longer needs the mask. She has sat with the discomfort of her own truth and decided that peace is worth more than performance. Jung warned us about the tyranny of the persona, the face we wear to be accepted by society, and she has learned to shed that skin because it chafed her soul. She does not dress for the male gaze. She dresses in alignment with her spirit. She does not speak in a softer voice just to make others comfortable. She speaks in her natural register, full and grounded, because she no longer fears being labeled difficult. There is nothing performative about her presence. It is rooted, whole, unshakable. And this terrifies the insecure man, who depends on women playing the part. When she does not flirt to please, when she does not laugh at mediocrity, when she does not offer compliments, she doesn't mean just to make the air feel lighter. He is left with himself, and it is that confrontation that rattles him. Because without her pretending, he cannot pretend either. The mirror becomes too clear. Jung taught that we project what we cannot accept in ourselves, and this woman, unadorned by expectation, becomes a reflection too honest to dismiss. She is not ice, but she will not melt on command. She is not hard, but she will not bend for empty praise. She knows what it means to nurture, but she will not mother a grown man into manhood. Her femininity is not up for barter. It is not aesthetic. It is not soft on cue and sensual by demand. It is fierce, mysterious, and entirely her own. She embodies the anima that Jung spoke of, the feminine archetype within the collective unconscious, but she does so on her own terms, not to fulfill someone else's dream of a woman, but to embody her own. She does not wield beauty as a weapon or a shield. She simply is, and that enoughness is her power. Her self-respect hums beneath every step. She does not need to be watched to feel worthy. She does not need male validation to feel seen, and this unavailability to the game of performance makes her untouchable to those who only know how to love women who play along. She is not against beauty or grace or romance, but she will never weaponize those things to gain access to spaces or people that are not ready for her. She does not compete. She does not beg. She does not shapeshift. She knows that the most radical act in a world obsessed with image is to be genuine, and so she island quietly, unapologetically, powerfully. Not because she wants to be admired, but because she refuses to abandon herself again. Her femininity is no longer a script, it is a language, and only those fluent in truth will understand what she's saying. The sixth habit that makes a quiet woman powerful is her fierce protection of her inner world. She treats her peace like sacred ground and does not offer it up for cheap validation or fleeting company. While others might mistake her stillness for weakness or her silence for emptiness, she knows that what grows in solitude is often the strongest. Carl Jung spoke of the importance of individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole by facing the contents of the unconscious, and this woman has walked that path alone. She has learned that noise is not clarity and attention is not love. Her sanctuary was not handed to her. It was carved out through grief, through boundaries, through 100 nights of quiet reckonings. And so, she does not let just anyone in. She does not expose her soul to those who only want a sip of it. She does not explain her dreams to those who laugh at magic. She does not lay down her intuition to be palatable to those who have never met their own. Her inner world is not up for debate. It is not a canvas for other people's projections. It is not a space she decorates for external approval. It is hers, and it is guarded, not because she is closed, but because she is rooted. She has learned that openness without discernment is a leak, and leaks drain the spirit. Jung would call this a withdrawal of projections, a reclaiming of the psychic energy that once scattered itself outward, hoping to be loved. Now, she draws that energy inward. She tends to it like a garden. She listens to her body, to the symbols in her dreams, to the whispers that surface in stillness. She trusts herself more than the noise. She trusts the voice that guided her through the fire, not the ones that only appeared when it was convenient. This kind of woman is disorienting to those who depend on access as proof of connection. Insecure men feel entitled to her softness, to her stories, to her care, but find only quiet gates and still waters that do not rush toward them. She will not open the door just because someone knocks loud enough. She knows that not every visitor comes in peace. She is selective, not from pride, but from healing. She has watched what happened when she ignored her knowing. She has buried the parts of herself that once begged to be chosen, and now she knows better. She knows that intimacy is not built on volume or urgency, but on resonance. She listens for that resonance. She does not flinch when it is absent. Her inner world is not a performance. It is not curated for Instagram or flirtation or the illusion of depth. It is a realm of symbols and scars, of rebirth and shadow integration, of forgiveness and fierce self-loyalty. It is the product of 1,000 choices to return to herself, even when leaving would have been easier. Jung taught that the soul speaks in images and silence, and she understands both. She is not guarded out of fear, but out of reverence. Her boundaries are not barbed wire, they are sacred thresholds. And to be welcomed across them is not a right, but a privilege earned only through truth, respect, and the courage to meet her where she lives, not just where she smiles. She is not interested in being figured out. She is interested in being felt, and if someone cannot do that without disturbing the quiet she bled for, they are simply not meant to stay. The seventh habit that makes a quiet woman powerful is her decision to choose presence over performance in every room she enters. She does not shapeshift to make others comfortable, does not contort herself to fit into roles that shrink her, and does not perform emotions she does not feel just to keep the peace. Her presence is her anchor. It is not loud, but it is undeniable. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and this woman has claimed that privilege without apology. She is not interested in being the most agreeable person in the room, nor is she afraid to be misunderstood by those still addicted to masks. She knows that to be truly present is to let go of how one should appear, and instead allow the truth of the moment to move through her. Her stillness is not passivity, but power under control. When she speaks, it is not to fill space or gain approval, but to reveal something that has been earned in the crucible of silence. There is no act, no rehearsed script, no exaggerated charm. She does not flatter to be liked or dim her light to be safe. She simply island, and that authenticity is disruptive to people who rely on performance to survive. Insecure men especially, who are used to women who manage their emotions for them, who smile through discomfort, who nod even when they disagree, find themselves unmoored in her presence. She is not cold, but she is exact. She does not apologize for existing on her own terms. She does not over-explain or justify her boundaries, her desires, her intuition. In Jungian terms, she has integrated the persona no longer ruled by the need to be perceived a certain way. She has made peace with being real instead of being liked. And that shift changes everything. It rewrites the contract of every interaction. It says, I will not abandon myself so you can feel safe. I will not edit my soul for temporary comfort. I will not dress up truth to make it taste sweeter. Her presence is an invitation for others to meet her there, to drop their masks, to feel the electric honesty of someone who refuses to lie just to belong. And for those who cannot meet her there, she does not chase. She releases, because she understands that performance might earn attention, but only presence creates connection, and she is done performing. She has performed before. She knows what it costs. She has smiled through grief, nodded through betrayal, danced for affection that left her empty. She buried those versions of herself with reverence, not resentment, and rose with a vow to never abandon her own presence again. When she enters a room now, she carries the weather of her soul with her. She is not afraid to be misunderstood. She is afraid of disappearing into someone else's version of who she should be, so she stays rooted, even when it is uncomfortable. Even when others project their discomfort onto her, she stays present, because presence, she knows, is her power. It is what protects her energy, preserves her truth, and draws toward her only those willing to meet her without the costumes. In her stillness, there is revolution. In her presence, there is prophecy. And in her refusal to perform, there is freedom, the kind that cannot be taken, only claimed. By the time a quiet woman has integrated these 7 habits, she is no longer simply avoiding noise, she is becoming the revolution within it. Her silence is not retreat but reclamation, a kind of steady, sacred defiance in a world that mistakes chaos for aliveness and volume for certainty. Carl Jung taught that individuation is the process of becoming one's true self, by integrating the conscious and unconscious, and this woman has done just that. She has met her fears in dark corners and sat with her own shame until it softened into understanding. She has pulled every mask off her face, the agreeable one, the pretty one, the quiet for your comfort one, and stood naked before her reflection without flinching. So now, when she walks into a room, she does not need permission to exist. She does not seek validation from the insecure. She does not need to speak to be heard, because her energy is sovereign. Her presence is whole. The quiet is no longer a hiding place, it is her altar. And what makes her powerful is not how she controls others, but how she refuses to be controlled by them. She does not react to every provocation. She does not explain herself to those who twist her truth. She does not dance for approval or soften her intelligence to fit into small minds. She simply stands grounded, alert, aware, a woman who has earned the right to be unshakable because she has walked through the fire of her own becoming and come out with nothing left to prove. Insecure men cannot handle her, not because she is cruel, but because she is clear. She sees through posturing. She feels the dissonance between words and energy. She hears the silent pleas for power disguised as confidence, and she refuses to respond in kind. She is not here to fix, to flatter, or to fold. She is not a mirror for their ego, nor a balm for their shame. She is not a reward for survival, she is the embodiment of evolution. And she does not entertain relationships that pull her back into roles she has outgrown. When she loves, she does so from fullness, not fear. When she leaves, she does not explain. When she is challenged, she listens but only to those who come with truth, not tactics. She no longer mistakes attention for affection, nor silence for weakness, nor noise for substance. She chooses her words the way a sculptor chisels stone with intention, precision, and reverence. She is a quiet storm, a private flame, a force wrapped in softness. And for those who try to define her through outdated frameworks of womanhood, the docile, the selfless, the ever-accommodating, she becomes a mystery they cannot decode. Because the healed, quiet woman is not here to play roles. She is here to be real, and that kind of woman is not only powerful, she is untouchable. Not because she is unreachable, but because she is unshaken. Not because she is closed, but because she is complete. Her quiet is not absence, it is essence. It is what remains when everything false has burned away, and for the first time she knows that her stillness is not something to fix, it is something to protect. There comes a point in a quiet woman's evolution when noise no longer tempts her, not even in the form of attention dressed as affection or chaos disguised as passion. She has learned, through trial and silence, that what the world often calls excitement is just a performance for the emotionally unavailable. She has been there. She's felt the high of being noticed and the crash of being discarded. And now, she's done with dramatics. She chooses depth over drama every single time. This habit does not come from bitterness or fear. It comes from discernment. Carl Jung taught that the soul speaks in symbols, dreams, patterns, and she has decoded enough of her own story to recognize when someone speaks from wounds and when they speak from wisdom. Drama, she now sees, is the playground of the unintegrated shadow. It is the dance of projection, deflection, and egoic hunger. It feeds on adrenaline and leaves her empty. Depth, on the other hand, nourishes. It asks questions that don't flatter but reveal. It listens. It pauses. It confronts discomfort without needing to escalate. When a quiet woman has chosen depth as a way of life, her nervous system no longer responds to the erratic. She does not romanticize red flags. She does not chase closure from those who communicate in confusion. She simply removes herself, not with cruelty but with clarity. That clarity, that refusal to participate in performative pain, is what makes her dangerous to people who are still addicted to the roles of victim, savior, or martyr. She will not validate your chaos. She will not beg you to stay. She will not fight for space in a room where she's already been asked to shrink. She just walks out, and the silence she leaves behind becomes louder than any argument she could have made. That is the power of choosing depth. It speaks for itself. She would rather sit alone in her own truth than be surrounded by people who can't handle their own. She no longer bonds over bitterness or trauma reenactments. She does not mistake a roller coaster for love. She knows love is not a test. It is not built on the thrill of uncertainty. It is built in the quiet moments where safety and truth can finally breathe. And in those moments, she no longer performs. She no longer over-explains. She no longer contorts herself into a shape someone else can accept. She remains still, present, whole. And for those who live for the highs and lows of dysfunctional attachment, her refusal to play the game feels like abandonment, but it is actually self-respect. A quiet woman who chooses depth is no longer in a rush to prove herself. She does not trade her intuition for chemistry. She does not chase what depletes her. She attracts those who have also made peace with their own shadows, who speak in substance, not spectacle. And that calm, grounded devotion to truth is her greatest act of rebellion in a world still addicted to the performance of connection. She no longer takes part in performances. She embodies presence. And her presence becomes the standard, a mirror, an invitation, a boundary. Drama cannot survive in her orbit anymore because she has made a home inside herself where only the real can stay. She is not afraid of silence. She is afraid of faking it, so she never does. There was a time when being called quiet felt like an accusation, a flaw to be corrected, a signal that something was missing or wrong. But a powerful woman eventually realizes that what the world calls quiet is often just misunderstood presence. She reclaims the word not as a limitation but as a sanctuary. Carl Jung believed that silence was not empty, but full of answers, and she has come to understand this not as philosophy but as lived experience. In her quietness lives observation, intuition, discernment. She doesn't speak to fill space, she speaks to shift it. The world rewards noise, volume, spectacle, but she rewards herself with stillness, awareness, and restraint. She has learned that speaking less doesn't mean knowing less. In fact, she often knows more precisely because she's not distracted by the compulsion to be heard. She listens deeply to what is said and what isn't. And when she does speak, her words carry weight because they are not performative, they are distilled. The quiet she embodies is not submission, but sovereignty. It is not the silence of a woman who is afraid, but the silence of a woman who doesn't need validation to know her worth. She has faced her shadow, as Jung would say, and found that there is nothing more threatening to shallow people than a woman who no longer performs, a woman who sits in silence without shrinking, a woman who does not fill the awkwardness with self-deprecation, a woman who is not afraid of long pauses, of empty rooms, of being misunderstood by those who only know how to connect through noise. That kind of quiet is dangerous. It unnerves people who mistake noise for depth. It challenges the egos of those who need constant affirmation. It exposes the emptiness behind attention-seeking and the desperation beneath performative charm. She no longer apologizes for the quiet that once made her feel invisible. Now, she wears it like armor, or better like silk, soft but impenetrable. Her quietness is a choice, not a defect, a ritual, not a reaction. It protects her energy and amplifies her power. Because in silence, she returns to herself. She listens to her body, her instincts, the ancient voice that tells her when to stay, when to go, when to fight, and when to simply observe. And that voice is never loud, it whispers. So she's learned to make space for it, to honor it, to trust it. She no longer tries to keep up with people who rush to speak, just to be right. She moves at the speed of alignment, not urgency. And that makes her magnetic to those who are ready and repellent to those who are not. The more rooted she becomes in this sacred quiet, the more she notices how rare it island, how many people are terrified of what they'll hear if they stop talking. But she is not. She has made peace with what silence shows her. She has become fluent in her own pauses. And from that place, she doesn't need to raise her voice to be respected. She doesn't need to dominate a room to be powerful. Her presence speaks before she does. Her quietness is not an absence. It is a force, and it no longer needs to be explained. A quiet woman doesn't rush. She doesn't speak just to react, and she doesn't move just to prove she can. She watches, listens, absorbs, not out of passivity, but out of precision. Carl Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, and a woman who embodies this knows that observation is a form of wisdom. She doesn't need to interrupt or over-explain to assert herself. She reads between the words people choose. She watches how someone treats the waiter, how they speak when they think no one is listening, how often they mention their wounds without ever showing their healing. She is not impressed by performance. She is not moved by charisma without consistency. Instead, she tracks patterns, energy shifts, and incongruities. She is not paranoid, she is perceptive. Because power, for her, is not about control, but clarity. She acts when the moment calls for it, not when the ego demands it. This rattles insecure people who mistake impulsiveness for strength. It frustrates those who expect her to mirror their chaos, who want her to be swept into their storms, who misread her stillness as ignorance. But what they fail to see is that by the time she speaks, she has already mapped the emotional terrain. She knows where the cracks are. She knows who is pretending and who is present. And when she finally moves, it is with accuracy. Her decisions are not flinches, they are intentions. She has cultivated the discipline to sit in discomfort long enough to understand it, to notice what's hers and what's been projected onto her, to make sure she is not reacting from old wounds, but responding from current truth. This makes her powerful beyond words. Because the world does not expect a quiet woman to be this discerning, this surgical with her insight, this bold in her restraint. Her silence is not fear, it is filtration. It lets her see who panics in the presence of pause, who cannot stand to be read by someone who does not need to be loud to be clear. She has learned that the louder people are, the more likely they are to miss things. But she doesn't miss much. She knows that power is not just having the answers, but knowing when to ask the right questions, when to stay silent, when to leave the room, when to speak in a way that nothing ever sounds the same again. She acts when her spirit is aligned, not when her pride is provoked. And this is what makes her untouchable to those who rely on confusion, distraction, and dominance. She does not flinch, she does not chase, she does not perform, she watches, she waits. She acts not for validation, but for impact. And every action she takes is rooted in awareness, not anxiety. This is not caution, this is power cultivated in patience. It is maturity forged in stillness. It is knowing that the more reactive the world becomes, the more radical it is to be intentional. A quiet woman who observes before she acts is not afraid of being underestimated. She welcomes it, because it gives her room to move undetected, room to rise without resistance, room to be exactly who she is without needing permission. Her watchfulness is not weakness. It is strategy, it is presence, it is power that cannot be rushed, rattled, or replicated. A quiet woman does not confuse every invitation to fight as a call to prove herself. She has nothing to prove. Not to strangers who misunderstand her silence, not to men who test her patience, not to family who mistake her boundaries for betrayal. Carl Jung once wrote that the best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our own shadow onto others. And a woman who has done that work knows when someone is trying to bait her into a battle that has nothing to do with her. She doesn't take the bait. She doesn't enter the arena every time someone throws down a challenge wrapped in insult. Not because she's afraid, not because she's weak, but because she understands that most arguments are just trauma reenactments in disguise. Most provocations are unhealed wounds looking for somewhere to land, and she refuses to be the landing pad. When someone tries to drag her into a spiral of defensiveness, she recognizes the pattern. She sees it for what it is, a demand for emotional labor, a plea for validation, a desperate test to see if she can be controlled, and she opts out. That decision, to walk away without explanation, to disengage without hostility, terrifies those who expected a reaction. It exposes the truth they don't want to see, that they cannot shape her narrative with noise, that their power over her is imagined, not earned. She is not disarmed by criticism. She does not contort herself to be liked. She does not shrink to avoid being labeled difficult. because her peace is not up for negotiation. She has learned that every time she chooses silence over spectacle, she strengthens her center. She knows that clarity doesn't always need defense. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is nothing at all. Not the kind of nothing born from apathy, but the kind born from profound discernment. She knows when speaking will serve the moment, and when silence will speak louder. And that choice is not easy. It requires her to resist the old conditioning that taught her to explain, to please, to smooth things over, but she does it anyway. Because she no longer confuses being understood with being safe. Her safety is internal now. It's in the way she can sit in discomfort without crumbling. It's in the way she can hear someone's projection and not swallow it as truth. It's in the way she knows that battles are often won not through volume but through vision. Her vision is clear, her energy is sovereign. She doesn't fight battles that are beneath her spirit. She doesn't need to win every debate, respond to every attack, or correct every misperception. She lets people misunderstand her when understanding would cost her peace. And that restraint, that poise, that refusal to be dragged into emotional quicksand is what makes her a force of nature. She has learned the art of the elegant exit, the quiet pivot, the dignified no. She does not lose sleep over being mischaracterized. She sleeps well knowing she stayed aligned with herself. And the world, still addicted to noise and reactivity, doesn't know what to do with a woman who chooses her own energy over ego. So it tries to provoke her, test her, shake her, but she stays rooted. Because she knows every battle she doesn't enter is a war already won. There is a kind of power that does not shout, does not seek applause, does not ask for permission, and it belongs to the woman who has come home to herself. A quiet woman who belongs deeply to herself moves through the world differently. She does not wait to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. She does not seek to be understood because she understands herself enough to stand alone. She does not bargain for love, contort for acceptance, or perform palatability to earn proximity. She is not detached, but she is no longer dependent, not on approval, not on praise, not on being liked. Carl Jung spoke often of individuation, the sacred process by which a person integrates all aspects of themselves to become whole, and she has done that work. She has sat in silence long enough to meet her own shadow and did not run. She has held space for her own complexity and emerged not broken, but anchored. So now, she is untouchable not because she is cold, but because she is clear. Her energy is not available for every demand. Her time is not an open field for anyone to trample through. Her heart is not up for negotiation. She offers presence, not performance, intimacy, not obligation. And for many, that kind of sovereignty is unsettling, because it cannot be manipulated. It cannot be guilted into giving. It cannot be threatened into submission. A woman who belongs to herself cannot be stolen. Her worth is not up for debate. It is not reactive to attention or diminished by absence. She knows her value and does not need you to confirm it. She walks into rooms without armor because her peace is protection enough. She speaks with conviction, not to dominate, but to participate in the truth. Her silence is not an absence, it is a boundary. Her absence is not a punishment, it is a decision. She will love you fiercely, but she will not abandon herself to do it. She will walk beside you, not behind you. And if you ask her to dim to make you comfortable, you will lose her. Not because she is punishing you, but because she cannot betray herself anymore. That was the old self, the version of her who thought sacrifice equaled love, who thought silence meant safety, who believed that staying small would earn her peace. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone fully formed, whole, no longer waiting to be saved, no longer confused by the chaos of others. She knows who she is when no one is watching. She knows what she feels when the room is quiet. She knows what she needs without shame, and she meets herself there, again and again. That is her revolution. Not loud, not chaotic, but unshakable. A quiet woman who belongs to herself is a mirror you cannot distort. She does not flinch in the face of projection. She does not react to bait. She does not abandon her values to be chosen by someone too afraid to rise. She does not apologize for the space she takes up, the voice she carries, or the clarity she holds. She does not explain her intuition, her distance, her refusal to chase. She simply island, and that is more than enough. Because when a woman stops seeking permission to exist, She becomes more than powerful, she becomes free.